Thank you so much, Kathy, for those introductory comments. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to our first presenters. We will be joined by Preeti Iyer and Kyle Barnes. The presenters are a duo consisting of a Princeton alumna and co-founder, as well as a Princeton undergraduate student and co-founder. Both of them are working with Professor Sam Wong, and they will be presenting Representable.org.
Hi, thank you for that introduction. Can you see the presentation all right?
We can see it, thank you.
Awesome.
All right, we'll get started. So, hi everyone, my name is Kyle Barnes.
And I'm Preeti Iyer, and today we're extremely excited to present to you our venture, Representable, a civic tech tool to fight gerrymandering. Gerrymandering has evolved to one of the largest threats to fair democracy founded on district-based representation. To explain our story better, we wanted to first take you to Prince William County in Northern Virginia. Prince William County is a diverse county with a vibrant Latinx community. The county has become Virginia's only majority-minority county and thus requires political representation that truly mirrors the needs of such diversity. In a system that works, the Latinx community will have unified representation and voting power to have a voice in electing an official that cares about their needs. However, rather than placing the county's significant Hispanic community into one district, different district maps split the communities up to 8 times to minimize its power, tearing apart a vibrant minority community and voting base into broken pieces with minimal impact. Prince William County is unfortunately just one of the countless communities across the country affected by gerrymandering. Historically, ethnic and religious communities have disproportionately suffered, and in many cases are left without a fair voice in democracy. But we're finding ways to fight back to fix the system with data. A community of interest is a group of individuals who share common legislative interests and benefit from cohesive representation. These population groups are the building blocks for drawing county, district, and city lines that ultimately dictate election outcomes. Additionally, these are legally enforceable fairness standards, making them incredibly powerful. Over 26 states now legally require community groups to be respected when drawing districts. However, in the absence of community data that is understandable to map makers and politicians and can be used to truly hold them accountable, the status quo prevails, incumbents will rarely lose, and marginalized communities will continue to be forgotten. That's why we created Representable. We are creating a platform to collect, analyze, and share crowdsourced community data to add more public input to democracy.
So how does it work? Community members start on our online survey by annotating their community interests, the cultural, historical, economic, and social interests that bind them together. Then they draw a map. Community members can easily select the block groups, which is a basic unit of the census, that comprise their community so that their map can be easily understood and used by map makers. Then, upon submission, the map is added to our database. This is a powerful database of communities of interest, which is then used by organizations to advocate for their communities, by map makers to ensure that district plans take communities into account, and by citizens and journalists to directly evaluate proposed maps. Where does this data go? Community data gathered through Representable can not only be visualized on our site, but can also be exported for use in public comment as a PDF sent directly to the commission or representatives. At the same time, these maps are in the industry standard GeoJSON format, meaning they'll be used behind the scenes when maps are actually being drawn or analyzed by experts. This data is standardized and actionable, empowering anyone to analyze and critique the mechanisms of our representative democracy, ranging from the local to the federal levels. Through easily accessible digital tools, we're making communities visible so that voices of all backgrounds can be heard. This provides journalists and concerned community members with the critical community information they need to ensure that our democracy respects the representation of all groups, and to unmask what previously took place by an elite few behind closed doors. But we can't do this alone. We work with grassroots organizations who are already active in their states and local communities to launch community mapping drives, which encourage community members to put the power of maps in their hands. That just scratches the surface of what we're doing. We're growing fast and are developing relationships with civic organizations who work in our 14 priority states with the goal of putting 100,000 communities on the map by June 2021. Our current team of 7 undergraduates, augmented by the policy experts and lawyers at the Princeton Gerrymandering Project, are philanthropically backed by our civic venture partners, including a $750K grant from Schmidt Futures. Currently, we're working closely with organizations like these ones here to launch community mapping drives and develop partnerships so that these organizations are empowered to do the work gathering community data on the ground. But time is short, especially at this critical moment in American democracy. In order to maximize impact, we're seeking funding and connections that can accelerate our network building strategy to scale nationally and help us develop training materials, particularly for underrepresented communities. We're focused on the upcoming redistricting cycle and are in the process setting up the infrastructure to create routine change in many jurisdictions where community data can influence democracy at a local, regional, and state level for years to come. At Representable, we're fixing a fundamental weakness in our democracy. We want to give every community in the country not just a voice, but a map so that they can fight for fair representation. So that communities like the Hispanic population of Prince William County can fight the politicians that want to split them apart behind closed doors. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle and Preeti. Mauricio, I think you're on.
Yeah, hi, it's a pleasure to be with you. And Kyle and Preeti, I know I spoke with Kyle yesterday, and in the discussion, I think you know that what you're trying to do actually has a lot of potential in many, many areas. I think the direct representative data from residents, I think, is something that we're all looking for. My question is really focused on, I do think this is really timely, and that at this particular point in time, the census finishing, what do you feel are some outcomes that could be had in the short term? And then what are some of the steps that you feel need to be taken in order to gain those outcomes? And short term could be 6 months to a year, whatever you feel is appropriate.
I can take this one. Sounds good. So I think to explain really some textbook examples of short-term outcomes that we're seeking, we really want this data to be used by map makers when they're drawing the maps. In advance of drawing maps, we want to run these community mapping drives, working with organizations like our partners in Michigan and Illinois currently, and gathering that data so that it can be directly submitted to commissions, like the commission in the state of Michigan that is being put together basically as we speak, so that these commissions are immediately using this data to draw the maps themselves.
Tahesha.
Yes, hi, and thank you, Kyle and Preeti. I just have a quick question. Has this app been piloted anywhere throughout the country? And if so, what have been the results?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We ran a big pilot this summer in Michigan with one of our partners, Voters Not Politicians, which is a large grassroots organization. So we had worked really closely to gather a lot of community members to be initial beta testers and to kind of get and iterate based on their feedback to make the tool as usable as possible. So we received a lot of really encouraging feedback from people who are able to kind of give really tangible experiences to their community and be able to submit that information to kind of give a lot of power to their individual communities. So we received a lot of encouraging feedback there and are continuing to iterate alongside them to make it as usable as possible. So we've refined a lot of the user experience to be extremely accessible for users of all backgrounds. And we've added translations and done a lot of things based off of that feedback. And we're continuing to do more pilot trials with communities to really make sure that we're making this in the most accessible way possible.
You rarely get a chance to talk to a judge who actually is in the position of power and influence over your very venture. Deborah. You're on mute, Deborah.
There we go.
Great.
Look, this is really an exciting project, especially now. because we've got redistricting coming up in 2021. But I've got two questions about the project. One is outreach. How good are you at getting groups to give you the data that you need? And two, in the experiment you've already done, or the proof of concept you've already done, do you have a sense of how you scale up? I mean, you'd have to map the entire United States in the most granular way. And can you do that by 2021? Or will you be able to demonstrate it in small sections of the country and then hope the next time you'll be ready?
Sure. So we're really hopeful that we can make a strong impact in 2021, mapping all over the country. We currently have functionality for all 50 states. And as I mentioned very briefly in our presentation, we really follow an outreach model of reaching out to organizations. These are organizations that are already on the ground doing the work, fighting gerrymandering, fighting for representation. And so we make strong connections with them and consistently show up for them so that they can use Representable and get it out for people on the ground to use this tool. But we're not just stopping there. We're also seeking to really replicate our outreach strategy on all different levels. Finding maybe students who are civically engaged, finding special interest groups such as MALDEF or the NAACP who would benefit from this tool, and really expanding our network as wide as possible so that we can get the visibility that we need to ensure that people are excited about using Representable.
Rod, you've got the question.
Thank you. Very nice presentation, Kyle and Preeti. Quick question here. If I understand gerrymandering correctly, the politicians who are engaged in it know what the maps look like, but they're still participating in this behavior. And so your project will add additional data. And so my question is, how do you get them to act in an appropriate manner on that data?
Yeah, in a lot of states now, maps are in this upcoming redistricting cycle will be drawn by independent citizen commissions. So in that case, it's a nonpartisan commission of elected representatives to draw the map. So in that case, this data will be used directly as data for them to understand it better. In other states where their maps are still drawn by politicians, we're hoping that by actually having access to this data, journalists and different policymakers and different think tanks and different research groups will actually have the tools now to hold them accountable and to be able to kind of have a level of insight that previously was not available into how gerrymanderers are splitting apart really marginalized communities. So we're hoping to just democratize access to that information.
Can you give me one example other than redistricting where this technology that you're using, this platform that you're using, would have an impact on democracy? Assume that redistricting has already happened.
Sure thing. I think we can imagine a lot of different situations where that could happen. Fundamentally, it's a matter of getting representation for these communities themselves. So I can imagine an administration, maybe a governor or someone like that, really using Representable to gather communities so that they can have those communities reflected in the policies that they're creating, in the way that they're allocating resources. And that way we're thinking of it as an augmentation of the census. And then it can also be used in court to challenge redistricting if we keep that really focused on redistricting itself.
Excellent job, both of you. Excellent job. Anyway, back to you.
Yes, thank you, John. Preeti and Kyle, thank you very much. I really appreciated that presentation. Now I'm thrilled to introduce